My name is Imani Vance, and I am 70 years old. On the day I buried my husband of 50 years, my daughter-in-law Ashley handed me an empty suitcase. She stood in the study. My husband built her face cold and impatient. She screamed, "Pack your bags! The old leech doesn't stay here." My son Jamal, her husband, just looked at the floor. He mumbled, "Mom, maybe it's time for a nursing home." They thought I was just a dependent old woman, a grieving widow who knew nothing about the world. They had no idea about the $28 million inheritance my husband Marcus had left entirely to me. And they certainly didn't know about Aura Cosmetics. They didn't know about the skyscraper in New York City. They didn't know about the $900 million empire, all under my name. I just looked at my son, looked at his wife, picked up the small suitcase and said, "Okay." That night from the presidential suite at the Four Seasons, I made one phone call. "Davis," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "It's IM. Liquidate Vance Properties, start the forensic audit, and freeze all of Jamal and Ashley's accounts, immediately." Before I continue this story, please leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. And please like this video and subscribe to Never Too Old if you believe that underestimating a strong woman is always a mistake. Now back to the story. The silence in the house was heavy. It was the kind of quiet that settles after a storm. But I knew the storm was not over. It was just beginning. It was 3 hours after the funeral. The last of the casseroles had been put away. The last of the sympathetic neighbors had gone home. I was standing in Marcus's study, the scent of his cigars and old books still hanging in the air. I ran my hand over the dark mahogany of his desk. 50 years. We had built an empire together, or rather we had built two. Marcus built Vance Properties, a solid, respectable $28 million real estate company here in Atlanta. He was the face, the strong, reliable man everyone knew and trusted. I built Aura Cosmetics, a $900 million private corporation based in New York. I was I.M. Monroe, the mysterious CEO nobody ever saw. It was our secret. It allowed me to move in circles Marcus couldn't, and it allowed him to be the community pillar he always wanted to be. My son Jamal was sitting on the leather sofa, his head in his hands. He was 45 years old, but in that moment he looked like a child. His grief was real. I knew that, but I also knew his weakness. And his wife Ashley preyed on that weakness like a vulture. The door burst open. It didn't just open, it was thrown, slamming against the wall. Ashley stood in the doorway. She was 42, dressed in a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Her face, however, was not grieving. It was impatient. It was cold. She was holding an empty Samsonite suitcase. She threw it onto the priceless Persian rug in the center of the room. The sound was like a slap. "All right, that's done," Ashley said. Her voice was high and sharp. "The funeral is over. Now we deal with the living arrangements." Jamal looked up, his face confused and blotchy from crying. "Ashley, what is this?" "It's a suitcase, Jamal," she snapped. She turned her cold blue eyes on me. "I want you to pack your things. I want you out. Tonight." I turned slowly from the window. I looked at the suitcase. Then I looked at her. "Ashley," I said, my voice calm. "We just buried Marcus this morning, my husband of 50 years. Ashley let out a sound that was almost a laugh. It was horrifying. "And now he's gone," she said. "Which means this house, the company, all of it." She waved her hand vaguely. "It all belongs to Jamal now." She glared at her husband, daring him to disagree. "And I," she said, stepping further into the room, "am not going to have an old leech living in my house." The insult hung in the air. Leech, after 50 years of building, of planning, of raising her husband. I looked past her. I focused every bit of my will on my son. Jamal. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his sobs. He flinched. Is this what you want? Jamal wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, at his expensive shoes. He twisted his wedding ring. Mum, he stammered. His voice was thick and weak. Mum, Ashley, she thinks. Well, we just think that maybe. He couldn't finish. He was drowning. Ashley stepped in, rolling her eyes. For God's sake, Jamal, stop mumbling. She turned back to me, and her entire face changed. She put on a mask of fake, condescending pity. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. Look, Imani, she said, stepping so close I could smell her expensive perfume. You've lived a very sheltered life. You relied on Marcus for everything for 50 years. You don't know the first thing about money or business or how the real world works. She patted her own chest, a gesture of self-congratulation. Jamal and I will handle things now. Vance Properties is worth $28 million. We can't risk an old grieving woman. She paused, a confused woman, making a mess of Marcus's legacy. There it was. The mistake. The fatal error all greedy people make. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a 70-year-old woman who didn't even know how to write a check. They had no idea that I was the one who taught Marcus how to read a balance sheet. They had no idea I was the one who vetted every deal for Vance Properties. And they definitely had no idea that my real company, Aura Cosmetics, could buy Vance Properties with its petty cash. I let out a slow, shaky breath. I let my shoulders slump. I played the part they had written for me. I looked at my son, his face weak and tear-stained. I looked at my daughter-in-law, her face triumphant and cruel. I nodded, just once. A small, defeated gesture. All right, I whispered. Ashley's eyes widened. She was stunned. She had expected a fight. She had expected tears begging. She had not expected me to fold this easily. Her shock turned into a smirk of pure victory. Good, she said. I'm glad you're seeing reason. I've already called Silver Pines. It's a very nice facility. They have a room ready. I want you gone in 1 hour. I didn't go to my bedroom. I didn't need to. I walked to the hall closet and pulled out the small black overnight bag I always keep ready for emergencies. In my line of work, you always have a go bag. It contained a change of clothes, my real laptop, my secure satellite phone, and a hard drive that contained every secret of my real life. I walked to the grand staircase. Ashley was already in the kitchen, her voice bright and cheerful as she talked on the phone. Yes, I heard her say. The complication is being handled. We can move forward with the liquidation. Jamal was nowhere to be seen. He had probably hidden himself in the den, ashamed or simply too cowardly to watch his mother be exiled. But someone else was there. Elijah, my 18-year-old grandson, was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He was a good boy, quiet, brilliant. He had my mind for numbers and his grandfather's heart. His face was pale with a rage so profound it made him shake. Grandma, he whispered, his voice cracking. I heard what Mum said. She can't do this. I won't let her. I put my gloved hand on his arm. I silenced him with a look. Elijah, I said, my voice low and firm. I need you to do exactly as I say. I need you to drive me to the 4 seasons. Elijah's confusion lasted only a second. He looked at my face, at the cold, hard expression that had replaced my grief. He saw the truth. This was not a defeat. This was strategy. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his own voice hardening. He grabbed my overnight bag. "And Grandma?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "I've been worried about Mum's spending. I put a keylogger on her laptop last month. I know her passwords." A slow smile spread across my face. "Good boy," I said. "Very should be good boy." "I'll find out what's really going on," he promised. As I walked toward the front door, Elijah held back for a moment. I watched him discreetly pull out his phone, tap the screen, and slip it into the pocket of his jacket. I knew that sound. He had just activated the voice recorder. "Mom," he called out, walking toward the kitchen. "Are you sure Grandma will be okay?" I didn't wait to hear her answer. I stepped out of the house Marcus built into the cool Atlanta evening and didn't look back. The door of the presidential suite clicked shut. The sound was final, like a gavel striking wood. I was alone. I walked past the marble entryway, past the enormous untouched floral arrangements, and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Atlanta glittered below me, a city of lights that had no idea I was watching. For 3 hours, I had played the part of the grieving widow. I had let my shoulders slump. I had let my voice tremble. I had allowed my son to look at the floor, while his greedy, foolish wife threw me out of my own home. "Leech," she had called me. I let the word echo in the silence of the suite. A confused old woman. I walked into the massive marble bathroom. I stared at my reflection. I saw the woman they saw, 70 years old, draped in black, looking lost and frail. "You made a mistake, Ashley," I whispered to the reflection. "You forgot who I am." My hands, which had trembled in front of them, were perfectly steady. I reached up and unpinned the grey salt and pepper wig I wore when I was Mrs. Vance. I pulled it off, tossing it onto the vanity. Underneath my real hair was jet black, cut in a sharp, severe bob that framed my face. The woman staring back was not the confused old woman. Her eyes were cold. Her jaw was set. This was the face of I.M. Monroe, the face of the woman who built an empire from nothing. I picked up the secure satellite phone from my go bag. Not the simple smartphone Ashley thought I barely knew how to use. This one was encrypted. I dialed a number I knew better than my own. It rang once. "Davis." The voice on the other end was professional sharp. "Davis, it's me." There was a brief pause. "Mrs. Vance, my deepest condolences. I was so sorry to hear about Marcus. We are all grieving with you." "Thank you, Davis," I said. My voice dropped 10 degrees. It lost all its softness. It became the voice that negotiates billion-dollar deals. "But I am not calling as Mrs. Vance. I am calling as I am." The change in his tone was immediate. The sympathy vanished, replaced by military efficiency. "Yes, ma'am. What are your orders?" "I need an emergency board meeting. Aura Cosmetics. This Friday. Top floor." "The New York headquarters, ma'am." "Yes. That skyscraper Ashley thinks is just another piece of real estate. I want the entire board present. No exceptions." "I'll clear the schedule, ma'am. May I ask the agenda?" "My son and daughter-in-law," I said, "have just made a very hostile move. It's time we restructure the entire portfolio." "Understood, ma'am," Davis replied. "I'll have the jet ready." I hung up without saying goodbye. I walked back to the window, looking down at the city. My heart ached for Marcus. He was a good man. He loved being Marcus Vance, the pillar of the Atlanta community, the head of Vance Properties. That $28 million company was his pride and joy. It was his legacy. But it wasn't our main source of income. It never had been. That $28 million was adorable. My legacy was Aura Cosmetics. $900 million built from my own family money, my own sweat, my own mind. Marcus was the charming face. I was the silent, invisible brain. I.M. Monroe, Ashley and Jamal had made the classic mistake of fools. They mistook the stage performer for the one writing the checks. They thought I was a dependent. They had no idea I was the bank. They thought they were taking my home. They didn't realize they were living in my world. I picked up the phone again. Davis, one more thing. Yes, ma'am. I am starting a forensic audit of Vance properties. Effective immediately. I want every invoice, every wire transfer, every expense account from the last 6 months. I want to know exactly where every single dollar has gone. There was no surprise in his voice. I'll have the team on it within the hour, ma'am. So good, I said, and hung up. I looked at the grey wig sitting on the bathroom counter. You wanted to see the confused old woman, I said to the empty room. You're about to see the real me. I stood at the window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Ashley's voice echoed in my head. Dependent. Knew nothing about money. She and Jamal were fighting over scraps. They were fighting over my husband's legacy, his $28 million company. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that his company was just his hobby. My company was the empire. I founded Aura Cosmetics 30 years ago using my own inheritance long before Marcus made his first million. He was a good man, my Marcus. He loved the spotlight, the handshakes, the reputation of being the great Marcus Vance. But I preferred the shadows. We made an agreement. He would be the face of Vance Properties. And I would be I.M. Monroe, the unseen, unknown founder and sole owner of Aura. $900 million, my company, my money, my power. That skyscraper in New York City they thought was just part of Marcus's portfolio. That's my headquarters. They thought they were kicking me out. They thought they were seizing $28 million. They had just insulted the woman who could buy and sell their entire world before breakfast and still have change left over. They called me a leech, a confused old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. I picked up my secure phone. It was time for I.M. Monroe to go to work. Davis, it's me. Yes, ma'am. And Davis, one more thing. I want a full forensic audit of Vance Properties. Start it immediately. I want every invoice, every wire transfer, every expense account from the last 6 months. I want to know exactly where every single dollar has gone. A knock came at the suite door. It was soft, almost hesitant. I opened it to find Elijah. My grandson stood there, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his laptop case gripped tightly in his other hand. He wasn't crying anymore. The grief and confusion from the afternoon when he saw his mother throw me out had been replaced by something else. Something cold. Something that looked terrifyingly like my own focus. "Grandma," he said, walking past me into the room. He didn't look at the expensive furniture or the view. He went straight to the desk, his movements sharp, angry. "You need to hear this." I sat in the heavy silk armchair opposite him. "What is it, Elijah?" He opened his laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard with a speed that always surprised me. "I kept the recorder on," he said. "The one I had in my jacket. I left it on the hall table after you left the house." He clicked a file. The speakers came to life. First, there was only silence. The sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor. The heavy thud of the front door closing after I had gone. Then I heard my daughter-in-law's voice. It was not the strained, respectful tone she used with me. It was bright. It was triumphant. "See," Ashley shouted, and I heard the sound of a bottle popping. Champagne. "I told you it would be easy." The old woman folded like a cheap suit. I closed my eyes. Leech. Then I heard my son, Jamal. His voice was muffled, thick with weakness. "Ashley, my God, we just kicked my mother out of her own house. The day we buried my father." "Oh, stop it, Jamal," Ashley snapped. All the fake pity she had shown me was gone, replaced by pure, venomous greed. "Don't be weak now. It's done. $28 million. It's all ours." There was a sound of glass clinking. She was pouring drinks, celebrating. "But what about the will?" Jamal stammered. "The lawyer said, 'The lawyer doesn't matter.'" Ashley's voice was sharp. "She's a confused, grieving widow. By the time anyone gets around to reading that, we'll have her declared incompetent. Now listen to me." Her voice dropped, becoming conspiratorial. "When that 28 million hits your account on Friday, and I mean the second it hits, we have to transfer 5 million. 5 million. My eyes snapped open. I stared at the laptop. Jamal sounded panicked. His voice rose. 5 million, Ashley, that's... Are you sure they'll... Don't be stupid, Ashley hissed. We have to pay off those Vegas creditors before they get serious. I'm not losing my hands because you're too busy crying about your mummy. Elijah stopped the recording. The silence in the hotel room was absolute. It was heavier, more suffocating than the grief had been. Vegas creditors. 5 million. This wasn't just about kicking me out. This wasn't just simple, ugly greed. This was something else entirely. This was desperation. "They're in debt," I whispered. My mind was racing. "It's worse than that, Grandma." Elijah turned his laptop to face me. His young face was grim. I haven't been honest with you. I've been worried about Mum's spending for a long time. Over a year." "What did you do, Elijah?" He looked down ashamed, but only for a second. I installed a keylogger on her computer last month," he said. "I know it was wrong, but I knew something was bad. I know all her passwords, her email, her bank accounts." He clicked open an email account. It was under my son's name, Jamal Vance. But the messages in the inbox, they weren't from friends. They were from entities I didn't recognize. Names like Mirage Holdings and Desert Sun Capital. The language was not polite. "Payment overdue. Final notice. Mr. Vance, your collateral is insufficient. We know where your family lives. We know where your son goes to school." My breath caught. Elijah scrolled through dozens of them. Threats, demands, emails from online casinos, bank statements from offshore accounts, all of them overdrawn, all of them showing massive losses. "My God," I breathed. "They've been gambling." "They've been losing," Elijah corrected me, his voice sharp. He opened a spreadsheet. It was complex something he must have built himself, tracking wire transfers. "It's not just their money, Grandma. They're not just in debt." He pointed to a line item, a transfer for $1 million. The date was 3 months ago. The account name it was drawn from was Vance Properties. "They've been stealing from the company," I said. It wasn't a question. $5 million, Grandma, in the last 6 months alone. His voice broke just for a second. "They were doing it while Grandpa Marcus was in the hospital." The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening speed. The puzzle formed in my mind, and the picture was grotesque. "They were embezzling," I said, thinking aloud, my voice hardening. They stole 5 million. They got in over their heads with loan sharks in Vegas. They were desperate. They needed to cover the hole before the company audit. Elijah nodded, his young face tight with an anger that matched my own. They thought Grandpa was going to die. They thought They thought my father would inherit everything. They were going to use the $28 million inheritance to pay off the 5 million they stole. It was all just a cover-up. But Marcus didn't leave the company to Jamal. I finished, the realization landing like ice in my stomach. He left it to me. I looked at my grandson. He looked back at me, the full, terrible truth passing between us. They don't have the 28 million, Elijah said, his voice barely a whisper. The creditors want their 5 million by Friday, and they just kicked the only person with any money out of the house. I stood up and walked back to the window. They weren't just greedy. They were trapped. They were desperate. And a desperate animal is the most dangerous kind. They didn't just kick me out. They were trying to survive. And they would do anything to get that money. They'll be back, Grandma, Elijah said. He already knew. I stared down at the glittering, uncaring city lights. I knew, I said. And this time we'll be ready for them. I stared at the laptop. The recording was over, but the silence it left behind was deafening. Vegas creditors, I whispered. The words felt like ash in my mouth. 5 million. This wasn't just greed. This wasn't just kicking an old woman out of her house to get rich. This was something else. This was desperation. This was fear. It's worse than that, Grandma. I turned to Elijah. His young face was grim, aged by a knowledge no 18-year-old should possess. He turned his laptop to face me. I haven't been honest with you, he said. His voice quiet. I've been worried about Mum's spending for a long time. Over a year. She's been reckless. What did you do, Elijah? He looked down, and for a second I saw the shame of a child forced to spy on his own parents. I installed a keylogger on her computer last month. I know it was wrong, Grandma, but I knew something was bad. I know all her passwords, her email, her private bank accounts. He clicked open an email account. It was under my son's name, Jamal Vance. But the messages flooding the inbox weren't from friends or colleagues. They were from entities I didn't recognize. Names like Mirage Holdings and Desert Sun Capital. The subject lines made my blood run cold. Payment overdue. Final notice. Collateral insufficient. He clicked one open. The language was not polite. It was brutal. Mr. Vance, your payment is 30 days past due. We are not patient men. We know where your family lives. We know where your son Elijah goes to school. You have until Friday. My breath caught in my chest. They had threatened him. They had threatened my grandson. Elijah scrolled through dozens more. Threats, demands, bank statements from offshore accounts, all of them overdrawn, all showing massive, catastrophic gambling losses. My God, I breathed, my hand flying to my mouth. They've been gambling. They've been losing. Elijah corrected me, his voice sharp with anger. He opened a complex spreadsheet, one he must have built himself, tracking wire transfers. It's not just their money, Grandma. They're not just in debt. He pointed to a line item, a transfer for $1 million. The date was 3 months ago. The account it was drawn from was Vance Properties. They've been stealing from the company, I said. The words were flat, dead. It wasn't a question. $5 million, Grandma, in the last 6 months alone. His voice broke just for a second, but the anger underneath was hard as steel. They were doing it while Grandpa Marcus was in the hospital, while he was dying. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with a horrifying, sickening speed. The picture it formed was grotesque. They were embezzling, I said, my voice hardening as I thought aloud. They stole $5 million. They got in over their heads with loan sharks. They were desperate. They needed to cover the hole before the company audit. Elijah nodded, his young face tight with a fury that matched my own. They thought Grandpa was going to die. They thought Dad. They thought my father would inherit everything. They were going to use the $28 million inheritance to pay off the $5 million they stole. It was all just a cover-up. I finished the thought, the realization landing like a block of ice in my stomach. But Marcus didn't leave the company to Jamal. He left it to me. I looked at my grandson. He looked back at me, the full, terrible truth passing between us in the silent hotel room. They don't have the $28 million, Elijah said, his voice barely a whisper. The creditors want their $5 million by Friday, and they just kicked the only person with any money out of the house. The next morning, the call came. I was in the hotel suite's dining room drinking strong black coffee and reviewing the first preliminary audit files Davis had sent over. My phone buzzed. It was Elijah. I didn't answer. I knew he was at the lawyer's office with his parents. I already knew what the lawyer was going to say. The second call came 20 minutes later, this time from an unknown number. It was Ashley. She was screaming. "What did you do?" I held the phone away from my ear. "Good morning, Ashley. I'm not sure what you mean." "The will," she shrieked. "We're at the lawyer's office. He just read the will. Marcus left everything to you, $28 million. Everything." I let the silence sit. "Yes," I said calmly. "That was the arrangement we made 30 years ago. He was a wonderful husband." You, that's not possible. Jamal is his son, and I'm his wife. Was there anything else, Ashley? I'm quite busy." I heard a muffled sound, Jamal's voice in the background. "Ashley, give me the phone." "Jamal?" I asked. "Mom." His voice was strained, desperate. "Mom, please. There's been a mistake. We need that money. You don't understand." "I think I understand perfectly, Jamal. You and your wife threw me out of my home." "It wasn't like that," he pleaded. "Ashley was she was upset. We're under a lot of pressure. Mum, those creditors, they're calling again. They won't stop." "Then you should have thought of that," I said, "before you and your wife stole $5 million from your father's company while he was dying." The line went dead. I looked at the phone in my hand, then placed it back on the charger. The silence of the suite settled around me again. They were panicking. They were trapped. The $28 million lifeline they thought would save them had just been cut. And the loan sharks were circling. I knew my daughter-in-law. Ashley was a cornered animal. She would not give up. She would chew off her own leg to get out of this trap. She would become more dangerous. And I was right. Back in the lawyer's office, Ashley was hyperventilating. "We're done." Jamal was pacing his hands, pulling at his hair. "They know about the $5 million. We're going to prison. It's over." "Shut up!" Ashley screamed, her face pale and blotchy. "Stop sniveling, Jamal. It's not over." "What are you talking about?" "The will is ironclad. She has everything. We have nothing." Ashley's eyes narrowed. A strange, calculating calm settled over her. She turned to the lawyer, Mr. Stevens, who was watching them with mild distaste. "Stephen?" She said, her voice low and steady now. What happens if the beneficiary of a will is found to be incompetent? The lawyer blinked. Well, if a beneficiary is deemed mentally unfit. Exactly. Ashley cut him off. She's 70 years old. Her husband of 50 years just died. She's grieving. She's confused. She's clearly not capable of managing a $28 million estate. Jamal stopped pacing. Ashley, what are you? She's losing her mind. Ashley said, the lie forming on her lips a perfect ugly thing. She's unstable. We, as her loving family, we have a duty to step in. She smiled a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. We have to protect her. We have to protect Marcus's legacy. The lawyer Stevens leaned forward, suddenly interested. A guardianship petition, he mused. An emergency competency hearing? Yes. Ashley was energized now, the panic replaced by a new, more sinister plan. We'll prove she's unfit. The court will appoint a guardian to manage her affairs. And who better? She put her hand on Jamal's chest, than her only loving son. Jamal looked horrified. You want to have my mother committed? I want to save us, Ashley hissed. Now listen. We move fast. Stevens, you file the petition. Cite rapid onset dementia and severe emotional distress. I'll get the proof. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Dr. Miller. Yes, hi. It's Imani Vance. I have a delicate family matter I need your help with. It's my mother-in-law, Imani. She's not herself. Not at all. We need an affidavit. And we're prepared to be very grateful for your professional discretion. She hung up and looked at Jamal, her face triumphant. She's a confused old woman. Who will the court believe, her or her devoted son and a licensed physician? Jamal said nothing. He just sank back into the chair, defeated. The second wave of the attack had been planned. The first was to kick me out. The second was to erase me completely. Jamal was staring at his hands, a broken man. We're finished, Ashley. Prison. They're going to... Stop it! Ashley's voice was a low hiss. She grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes were burning with a desperate, terrifying light. It is not over, do you understand me? We are not going to prison because of that old woman. But the will... Forget the will, she snapped. So she has the money. Fine. We just changed the plan. We moved to Plan B. Jamal looked at her confused. Plan B? What are you talking about? Ashley stood up and began to pace the lawyer's office, her mind working with manic speed. Think Jamal. She's 70 years old. Her husband of 50 years just died. She's emotionally unstable. She's losing her mind. She said the words, testing them, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She's lamb-cam, confused. Who wouldn't believe it? We're not going to ask her for the money. We're going to take it. We'll get guardianship. We'll prove she is incompetent to manage her own assets. The court will have to put someone in charge. She tapped Jamal on the chest. Her only loving, concerned son. The lawyer Stevens leaned forward, his own greedy eyes lighting up. An emergency competency hearing. It's aggressive, but possible. We would need substantial proof. Then we'll get substantial proof. Ashley was already pulling out her phone. She started dialing. Who's she going to call? Jamal? Tell me a name. One of Marcus's old business partners. I don't know. Maybe Don Fitzgerald? Ashley nodded, putting the phone to her ear. Mr. Fitzgerald. Hi, this is Ashley Vance. Yes, it's just awful. Thank you for your thoughts. Actually, the reason I'm calling, I'm so worried about Imani. She's, she's not herself. She keeps asking where Marcus is. She called me by her sister's name this morning. She's just completely lost. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Dr. Miller? Yes, hi, it's Ashley Vance. We have that delicate family matter we discussed. It's my mother-in-law, Imani. She's had a severe decline since Marcus passed. We need an affidavit of incapacity. Yes, rapid onset dementia. We are prepared to be very grateful for your professional discretion and your prompt signature. She hung up and looked at Stevens. You'll have your doctor's note by morning. Then she turned to Jamal. And you are going to call the bank. Tell them your mother is confused that she's trying to spend money wildly. Tell them to flag any large transactions. She turned back to the lawyer, her victory all but assured in her mind. Mr. Stevens, file the emergency petition. We want a hearing by the end of the week. I was reviewing the preliminary audit reports from Davis when the courier arrived. He handed me a crisp legal envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I signed for it, closed the door, and walked to my desk. I slit it open. Emergency petition for guardianship. They were alleging I was mentally incapacitated and a danger to my own financial well-being. A slow smile spread across my face. They were moving even faster than I had anticipated. Their desperation was making them sloppy. I picked up my secure phone and dialed Elijah. Grandma, are you okay? I'm fine, Elijah. The court papers just arrived. They're really doing it, he breathed, his voice filled with disgust. Yes, they are, I said calmly. They are trying to prove I am senile, and I'm not going to stop them. In fact, I'm going to help them. What, Grandma, no? We have to fight this. We are going to fight Elijah, but we fight on my terms. They think I'm a confused old woman. It's time we give them exactly what they want to see. Are you in a place where you can record? Yes, Grandma. Always. Good. They want evidence, we will give them evidence. But we will have the real recordings. We will have the truth. I took a deep breath and let my voice become the frail, trembling whisper of the woman they thought I was. I dialed Ashley's number. My other hand held my own recorder, which Elijah had set up for me. Ashley answered on the second ring, her voice sickly sweet. Imani, is everything okay? Ashley. I let my voice crack. I let a sob build in my throat. Ashley, I can't find him. Find who, Imani? Find who? I could hear the excitement, the predatory hunger just beneath her fake concern. Marcus, I wailed into the phone. I can't find Marcus. He didn't come home last night. I've been waiting. Is he with you? Did he call you? There was a pause. I could practically hear her turning on her own recorder, signaling to Jamal. Her voice, when she spoke again, was dripping with false pity. Oh, Imani, honey, listen to me. Marcus is gone. Remember we had the funeral. He passed away. No, I shouted, letting my voice break completely. No, you're lying. He was just here. He was just here. Why would you say that? Imani, you're confused. Ashley said, her voice a soothing, treacherous balm. It's okay. The grief it's just too much for you. Why don't you lie down, Jamal, and I will come over and and we'll take care of everything. No, no, I sobbed, and I hung up the phone. I sat in silence for a moment, my heart cold as stone. I looked at my own recorder, which was still running. Elijah, I said into my secure phone, did you get that? Yes, Grandma, he said. His voice was shaking with rage. I got all of it. Good, I said. Now for part 2. I let an hour pass, just long enough for Ashley to call her brother-in-law, the lawyer, and report my supposed breakdown. Then I picked up my other phone. The simple one. The Mrs. Vance phone. My real lawyer, Davis, had already done his work. He had contacted my private wealth manager at the bank yesterday, informing him that I suspected my daughter-in-law was attempting to commit fraud. He had warned them that a petition for guardianship might be filed and that Ashley or Jamal might try to flag my accounts. He also told my banker to expect a very strange phone call. I dialed the bank's private client line. Atlanta Private Wealth, a smooth voice answered. This is Thomas. How can I help you, Mrs. Vance? Thomas. I let my voice waver. Oh, thank goodness. I need your help. I need to move some money. It's very important. Of course, Mrs. Vance, he said. His voice was perfectly calm, but I knew he was recording this. What do you need to do? I need to make a transfer, a large one, right now. Okay, Imani, I can help with that. How much are we talking about? $1 million, I whispered. I need to send $1 million. There was a professional pause. 1 million, certainly. And where will we be sending these funds today? I held my own recorder close. It's for the cats, I said, my voice cracking again. The cats, Mrs. Vance. Yes, the International Cat Rescue Fund. I saw a commercial. They're in so much trouble, Thomas. The poor little things. They have nowhere to go. We have to help them. $1 million. Please, before it's too late. Thomas didn't miss a beat. He played his part perfectly. Mrs. Vance, that is, a very generous donation. $1 million is a substantial sum. Are you certain you want to move this amount today without speaking to your financial advisors? Yes, I snapped, sounding irritated and confused. Why won't anyone help me? It's my money. Marcus would want me to help the cats. Just send the money. Imani, he said, his voice full of the fake pity I was coming to loathe. Our records show that, well, we received a call from your son, Jamal. He expressed some concern about your well-being. He flagged the account. He was worried you might make decisions you wouldn't normally make. He did what? I shrieked. How dare he? It's my money, I built this. You send that money, Thomas. You send it right now, or I'll call the president. Mrs. Vance, I cannot authorize this transfer until I speak with your son. Thomas said, his voice firm but kind. It's for your own protection. I'm going to have to place a temporary hold on the account. You can't, I screamed. The cats, the poor cats. I slammed the phone down, ending the performance. I sat back in my chair. The trap was set. 20 miles away, Ashley's phone buzzed. She snatched it from the coffee table. It was an email alert from the bank. Subject, high-value transfer attempt. Account frozen. She read the banker's notes. Client Imani Vance attempted to wire 1,000 USD to an unverified entity, International Cat Rescue Fund. Client appeared highly agitated, confused, and referenced talking to the president. Per instructions from Mr. Jamal Vance, a temporary hold has been placed on all accounts. Jamal looked up as Ashley started to laugh. It was a high, sharp, victorious sound. She did it, Ashley shrieked, waving the phone in the air. She actually did it. Oh, she is gone, completely insane. She forwarded the email to their lawyer Stevens with a single line. This is the proof you needed. She's a danger to herself. We need that hearing now. Jamal read the email over her shoulder and the color returned to his face. $1 million to cats. Oh my God. He breathed, a wave of relief washing over him. She really is confused. Of course she is, Ashley said, pouring them both a drink. It's perfect. The doctor's affidavit, my recording of her episode, and now this. No judge in the country will let her keep control of that money. They clinked glasses. They were celebrating. They had the final, undeniable proof. They had won. They thought the game was over. They didn't realize I was the one who had just put them in checkmate. The Gulfstream jet touched down at Teterboro just before 9 a.m. I hadn't slept. I had planned. The flight from Atlanta was quiet, just me and my files. A black sedan was waiting on the tarmac. Not a flimsy limousine, but an armored Mercedes. The kind of car I use when I am Monroe. We didn't drive to an apartment. We drove straight into the heart of Manhattan. When we pulled up to the curb on Park Avenue, the building bearing the name Aura seemed to pierce the sky. It was 80 stories of black glass and steel. My glass, my steel. This was the skyscraper Ashley thought was just another line item in Marcus's portfolio. When I stepped out of the car, the doorman didn't see Imani Vance, the grandmother from Atlanta. He saw I.M. Monroe, the owner of the building. "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe," he said, holding the heavy glass door. "Good morning, Charles." I walked across the lobby. The sound of my heels on the black marble echoed. People moved aside. Secretaries, executives, interns. They all nodded, their faces respectful. "Mrs. Monroe?" "Ma'am?" "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe." They knew me here, not as the grieving widow, but as the founder, the boss, the one who signed the checks. I walked straight to the private elevator. My thumbprint unlocked the panel. I pressed the button for the 80th floor. This was my real home. This was my war room. The confused old woman was gone. The CEO was here to clean house. The elevator doors opened directly into the boardroom. It was my favorite room in the world. A single sheet of glass overlooked Central Park. My legal team was already standing. 3 of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in New York. They didn't see a grandmother. They saw their most important client. "Mrs. Monroe." Davis, my lead counsel, greeted me. "We are ready." I set my briefcase on the long glass table. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, gentlemen." Davis nodded. "You said it was urgent. The audit of Vance Properties is underway." "Good. Let's review what we have." I opened my briefcase and slid a thin, hard-bound folder across the table. "This is my file. Ashley Vance and Jamal Vance." Davis opened it. He didn't flinch. He just read. "Loan sharks in Vegas. $5 million, embezzled from Vance Properties while Mr. Vance was incapacitated." "Correct," I said. "They thought they would use the $28 million inheritance to cover the theft. When they found out the inheritance was mine, they panicked, which brings us to their plan B." I looked at the youngest lawyer, the digital forensic expert. "What did you find on the doctor?" He slid a tablet toward me. "Dr. Robert Miller, their expert witness for the competency hearing. He's not just unethical, ma'am. He's a complete fraud. How much of a fraud? He lost his license to practice medicine in New York in 2018. He lost it in California in 2020. And he lost it in Florida last year. All for the same thing, providing false medical testimony in guardianship fraud cases. He's not a doctor. He's a career criminal. I smiled. A cold, thin smile. Excellent. So we have their embezzlement. And we have their fraudulent expert witness. Just then, the large screen on the wall chimed. An incoming secure file transfer. Ah, I said, looking at the notification. And that will be the final piece. Davis looked at the screen. An encrypted file from Vance. My grandson, I said. He is gifted. The file downloaded. Davis opened it. His eyes went wide. What is it, Davis? Ma'am, it's an audio file. A recording. It seems to be a phone call between your daughter-in-law Ashley and Dr. Miller. I nodded. Elijah is very thorough. Put it on the speakers. He pressed the button. Ashley's voice filled the 80-story boardroom. It was sharp, conspiratorial. I don't care what you have to write. Just make it sound convincing. Rapid onset dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever. I need that signature on the affidavit by tomorrow, Miller. $50,000. That's the deal. Just make her sound crazy. Davis stopped the recording. The three lawyers stared at me. They thought I was a confused old woman, I said, standing up and walking to the window. They thought I was helpless. I looked down at the city below. They forgot. I built this. Davis, I said, turning back to the room. The hearing is Friday. I want all of you there. I want a live video feed to this boardroom. I want the SEC, the IRS, and the Atlanta Police Department ready to move on my signal. And Mrs. and Monroe. Yes, Davis. What about your son and daughter-in-law? I looked at the file with the evidence of their $5 million theft. I looked at the proof of their conspiracy to have me committed. They think they're coming to a competency hearing, I said. Make sure they're walking into an execution. The room was expensive. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and a view of the Atlanta skyline. This was Marcus's world. This was the office of his longtime attorney. It was not, however, a place of grieving. It was an arena. The long, polished conference table was set for execution. This was not just the official reading of the will. This was the real battle. The emergency hearing for my competency, the one Ashley and Jamal had pushed for. The one they thought they would win. On one side of the table they sat. Ashley was triumphant. Her black dress was impeccable, her makeup perfect. She looked less like a grieving daughter-in-law, and more like a woman about to cash a winning lottery ticket. She was smiling a tight, confident smirk. Jamal sat next to her, a puppet in an expensive suit. He looked relieved. The panic from the phone call was gone. His wife had a plan. His mother was about to be declared senile, and he would be given control of everything. He was a coward, and he was a fool. Next to them sat their lawyer, Stevens. He was shuffling papers, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face. He looked at me like I was a problem that was about to be solved. Then there was my side. I sat opposite them. I let my hands tremble just a little. I wore a simple grey dress. I kept my eyes down. I looked fragile, confused, beaten, exactly the part they needed me to play. Next to me sat Elijah. His face was a mask of stone. He said nothing. He just watched. Beside him sat our local counsel, a quiet woman named Maria. whose only job was to press play when I told her to. At the head of the table, a large television screen flickered to life. Judge Wright appeared, his face stern. He was presiding over this emergency hearing via video link. The trap was set. The players were in place. Ashley and Jamal looked at me with pity and greed. They thought they had me. They thought the old, confused woman was about to be put away. They had no idea what was coming. Judge Wright cleared his throat, his image sharp and imposing on the large video screen at the head of the conference room. "Mr. Stevens," the judge said, his voice booming slightly through the speakers, "you may begin." Ashley's lawyer Stevens stood up. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, and he oozed a kind of professional sympathy that made my skin crawl. He smoothed his tie, picked up his folder, and looked at Judge Wright with a deeply somber expression. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are gathered here today for a somber occasion. First, the reading of Mr. Marcus Vance's last will and testament. But second, and far more urgently—" He paused, turning his gaze toward me. "We are here to protect the very woman Mr. Vance loved most, his widow, Mrs. Imani Vance." I kept my eyes down. I looked at my hands in my lap, forcing them to tremble just slightly. Elijah beside me sat as still as a statue. "Your Honor," Stevens continued, his voice dripping with false concern, "my clients, Mr. Jamal Vance and his wife, Mrs. Ashley Vance, are here today with the heaviest of hearts. In the few short days since their father's tragic passing, they have witnessed a deeply concerning and rapid decline in Mrs. Vance's mental state." I risked a quick glance. Ashley was already dabbing at a perfectly dry eye with a black lace handkerchief. Jamal was staring at the table, the picture of a grieving son, though I knew he was just a coward. "We are not here to contest the will, Your Honor. We are here to protect the beneficiary of that will from herself. Mrs. Vance, at 70 years old and suffering an unimaginable loss, is clearly in a state of severe cognitive decline. She is confused, she is paranoid, and she is frankly incapable of managing her own affairs, let alone the $28 million estate her husband entrusted to her." He let that sink in. "We are petitioning this court for an emergency temporary guardianship. We have substantial, undeniable proof that Mrs. Vance is a clear and present danger to her own financial well-being. We believe this proof will make the court's decision swift and clear." Judge Wright looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Proceed with your evidence, Mr. Stevens." "Gladly, Your Honor," Stevens said. He picked up his first paper with a flourish. "First," he announced, sliding a document toward the camera for the judge to see, "we have a sworn affidavit from Dr. Robert Miller. Dr. Miller is a respected geriatric specialist here in Atlanta." I almost smiled. Respected. Elijah's research had shown Dr. Miller hadn't had a valid medical license in this state or any state for over 3 years. He was a professional witness, a man who sold his signature for cash. "Dr. Miller," Stevens continued, "formally examined Mrs. Vance and found clear, undeniable signs of rapid-onset Alzheimer's. His professional diagnosis is clear. She is mentally incapacitated, she cannot make sound judgments, and she requires immediate, full-time supervision." Ashley let out a small, staged sob. "Second," Stevens said, his voice growing even more mournful, "and this, Your Honor, is truly heartbreaking. We have audio evidence of Mrs. Vance's severe disorientation. I must warn you, it is difficult to listen to." He clicked a button on his laptop. My own voice filled the silent, expensive room. It was the voice I had performed for Ashley. "Marcus. I can't find Marcus." My recorded voice was a high, panicked wail. "Why won't anyone tell me where he is?" "You're lying. He was just here. He was just here." "Why would you say that?" The recording ended with the sound of my manufactured hysterical sob. Ashley buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Jamal looked like he was going to be sick. Stevens shook his head as if pained to his very soul. As you can hear, Your Honor, she does not even recall her own husband's passing. She believes he is still alive. She is living in a delusion. He paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. And finally, he said, going in for the kill. The most alarming proof of all. The event that forced my clients to take this drastic, heartbreaking action. We have a formal report from Mrs. Potts, Vance's private bank, filed just yesterday. He held up the third document. Your Honor, yesterday afternoon, Mrs. Imani Vance, my client's grieving, confused mother, attempted to wire $1 million to an unverified entity. He paused for dramatic effect. An entity she called the International Cat Rescue Fund. A few quiet gasps came from the lawyer's assistants in the corner. $1 million. For cats. Stevens repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. When the banker rightly questioned this massive, erratic transaction, Mrs. Vance became hysterical. She claimed she needed to talk to the president. The bank, acting on Mr. Jamal Vance's prior warnings about his mother's state, immediately froze the account to protect her. Stevens turned to face the judge on the screen. His hands spread wide. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. A fraudulent medical diagnosis. A complete break from reality. A reckless attempt to give away millions of dollars. She is a danger to herself. We implore you to grant this guardianship, to protect Imani, and to protect the legacy Marcus Vance worked so hard to build. Stevens clasped his hands in front of him, adopting the somber, humble look of a man who has just presented a tragedy. So you see, Your Honor, the picture is devastatingly clear. It is a classic, heartbreaking case. He began to tick the points off on his fingers, as if speaking to a child. 1. We have a sworn professional medical diagnosis of rapid onset dementia, not from a family member but from a licensed, respected specialist. 2. We have audio proof from just this week that Mrs. Vance is suffering from severe delusions, that she does not even recognize that her beloved husband has passed. She is living in a fantasy. And 3. We have concrete, irrefutable proof from her own bank that she is already acting on these delusions. An attempt to liquidate $1 million. $1 million to an imaginary cat fund. An act, Your Honor, that can only be described as textbook financial incapacity. He let out a long, theatrical sigh. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of that disgusting fake pity. Ashley was dabbing her dry eyes again. Jamal was staring at the table, a perfect puppet of shame. Your Honor, Stevens said, turning back to the video screen. We are not here to be cruel. We are here to be responsible. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Vance, love their mother. It is because they love her that they are taking this painful, necessary step. The will of Marcus Vance is clear. He left his $28 million estate to his wife. But what is also clear is that the woman sitting in this room today is sadly no longer the woman Marcus Vance trusted with that legacy. She is ill. She is vulnerable. And she is surrounded by, well, who knows what other cat funds are waiting to prey on her. He leaned in closer to the camera. She is clearly and undeniably incapable of managing a $28 million estate. She cannot be trusted with her own checkbook, let alone a multi-million-dollar corporation. Therefore, he said, his voice dropping to a firm, legal tone, we humbly and with great sadness petition this court to do what is right, to protect Mrs. Imani Vance from herself. We ask for an immediate summary judgment. We ask that temporary and subsequently permanent guardianship be granted to the only person who can possibly protect this family's legacy, her loving and responsible son, Mr. Jamal Vance, and his wife Ashley, who will act as his co-guardian. He closed his folder with a quiet final thud. It is the only logical, compassionate, and legally sound solution. We ask you to protect the Vance family. Thank you, Your Honor. He sat down. Ashley reached over and squeezed his arm, a brief thank you for his masterful performance. They looked at me. They were all looking at me, smug, confident, waiting for the old, confused woman to cry. They had no idea the execution was about to begin. All eyes in the room turned to me. Ashley had a smug, satisfied look on her face. Her lawyer, Stevens, looked like he was already calculating his bonus. My son, Jamal, just looked relieved. Relieved that the battle was over and he hadn't had to fight it. On the large screen, Judge Wright's face was stern. He looked at me, the confused old woman, with an expression of professional pity. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice deep and clear through the speakers. You have heard the petition. You have heard the evidence presented by your son and his counsel. This court finds these allegations deeply concerning. Do you have anything to say in your defense? This was the moment, the one they had pushed for, the one I had been waiting for. I sat up straight in my chair. The slight tremble in my hands stopped. My shoulders, which had been slumped in defeat, straightened. I lifted my head. My eyes no longer downcast and confused, but sharp-cold and perfectly focused. I looked directly into the camera, meeting the judge's gaze. Then I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk right into the trap. The entire room felt the shift. I saw Ashley's smirk falter. I saw her lawyer Stevens lean forward, his eyes narrowing, suddenly unsure. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. My voice was not the frail, trembling whisper they had heard on the recording. It was clear. It was firm. It was the voice of a 70-year-old CEO who had commanded boardrooms for 30 years. I have a great many things to say, but first, I turned to the quiet woman sitting beside me, my local counsel, Maria. Maria, why don't you begin? Maria stood up. She was a small woman, but she held herself with an authority that suddenly filled our side of the table. Ashley and Stevens looked at her confused. She wasn't part of their plan. She was just supposed to be a silent prop for the senile old lady. Thank you, Your Honor, Maria said, her voice cutting through the tension. First, let's address the matter of the will. Mr. Stevens is correct. The last will and testament of Marcus Vance leaves his entire estate, including Vance properties valued at approximately $28 million to his beloved wife, my client, Mrs. Imani Vance. Ashley and Jamal exchanged a quick, victorious glance. This was it. The lawyer was just confirming the facts. They were on the verge of victory. However, Maria continued, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine, there seems to be a fundamental, a profound misunderstanding of my client's financial position. Stevens' smug expression froze. Mr. Stevens and Mr. and Mrs. Vance, Maria said, have built their entire case on the assumption that this $28 million inheritance is the entirety of Mrs. Vance's net worth. They have based their petition on the idea that she is a dependent, a homemaker who knew nothing of her husband's business, and that this sum of money is, to her, a life-altering fortune that she is incapable of managing. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Your Honor, the truth is, my client does not need her husband's $28 million. Ashley's face went from smug to pale. Jamal looked up from the table for the first time, his mouth slightly open. Maria leaned forward. The truth is, Vance Properties was Mr. Vance's passion, and we all loved him for it. But compared to Mrs. Vance's personal, private, and independently owned assets, Vance Properties is, for lack of a better term, a side project. All eyes in the room turned to me. Ashley had a smug, satisfied look on her face. Her lawyer, Stevens, looked like he was already calculating his bonus. My son, Jamal, just looked relieved. Relieved that the battle was over and he hadn't had to fight it. On the large screen, Judge Wright's face was stern. He looked at me, the confused old woman, with an expression of professional pity. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice deep and clear through the speakers. You have heard the petition. You have heard the evidence presented by your son and his counsel. This court finds these allegations deeply concerning. Do you have anything to say in your defense? This was the moment, the one they had pushed for, the one I had been waiting for. I sat up straight in my chair, the slight tremble in my hands. Stopped. My shoulders, which had been slumped in defeat, straightened. I lifted my head. My eyes no longer downcast and confused, but sharp, cold, and perfectly focused. I looked directly into the camera, meeting the judge's gaze. Then I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk right into the trap. The entire room felt the shift. I saw Ashley's smirk falter. I saw her lawyer Stevens lean forward, his eyes narrowing, suddenly unsure. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. My voice was not the frail, trembling whisper they had heard on the recording. It was clear. It was firm. It was the voice of a 70-year-old CEO who had commanded boardrooms for 30 years. I have a great many things to say, but first, I turned to the quiet woman sitting beside me, my local counsel, Maria. Maria, why don't you begin? Maria stood up. She was a small woman, but she held herself with an authority that suddenly filled our side of the table. Ashley and Stevens looked at her confused. She wasn't part of their plan. She was just supposed to be a silent prop for the senile old lady. Thank you, Your Honor, Maria said, her voice cutting through the tension. First, let's address the matter of the will. Mr. Stevens is correct. The last will and testament of Marcus Vance leaves his entire estate, including Vance Properties, valued at approximately $28 million, to his beloved wife, my client, Mrs. Imani Vance. Ashley and Jamal exchanged a quick, victorious glance. This was it. The lawyer was just confirming the facts. They were on the verge of victory. However, Maria continued, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine, there seems to be a profound misunderstanding of my client's financial position. Stevens's smug expression froze. Mr. Stevens and Mr. and Mrs. Vance, Maria said, have built their entire case on the assumption that this $28 million inheritance is the entirety of Mrs. Vance's net worth. They have based their petition on the idea that she is a dependent, a homemaker who knew nothing of her husband's business, and that this sum of money is, to her, a life-altering fortune that she is incapable of managing. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Your Honor, the truth is, my client does not need her husband's $28 million. Ashley's face went from smug to pale. Jamal looked up from the table for the first time, his mouth slightly open. Maria leaned forward. The truth is, Vance Properties was Mr. Vance's passion, and we all loved him for it. But compared to Mrs. Vance's personal, private, and independently owned assets, Vance Properties is, for lack of a better term, a side project. Ashley and Jamal just stared. The smug, victorious looks were gone, replaced by a blank, profound confusion. Ashley leaned forward, speaking to her lawyer, Stevens, but her voice was loud enough for the entire room to hear. What is she talking about? What personal assets? She was a homemaker. She was nothing. Stevens. Her lawyer looked unsettled for the first time. He was frantically flipping through his own notes, his face pale. He was realizing far too late that his entire case was built on a financial assumption that was now crumbling before his eyes. Your Honor, Stevens stammered, this is irrelevant. It's a distraction. The petition is about her current mental state, her confusion, not some non-existent secret. Oh, it is far from non-existent, Mr. Stevens, Maria, my lawyer, said. Her voice cut through his blustering like a razor. Ashley turned her furious, confused gaze on me. What is this? What trick are you playing? You don't have anything. You lived off Marcus. You lived in my house. I just smiled. I held her gaze. I didn't say a word. Jamal was shaking his head, looking back and forth between me and his wife. Mum, what side project? What's she talking about? She's talking about the truth, Jamal, Maria said, stepping forward so she commanded the center of the room. Something your wife seems to have a severe allergy to. You built your entire case on the idea that Mrs. Vance is a confused old woman who can't possibly manage $28 million. You have in your own petition painted a picture of a woman who has never handled a single dollar in her life. She hasn't, Ashley shrieked, her voice cracking. Your Honor, Maria said, addressing the judge on the screen. May I formally introduce the court to my client? Judge Wright nodded, his own expression now intensely curious. He leaned forward. Please proceed, counsel. Maria took a deep breath, and her voice rang with a power that shook the room. Your Honor, and Mr. and Mrs. Vance. For 30 years, my client has lived a quiet, private life in Atlanta as Mrs. Imani Vance. But in the global business world, she is known by another name entirely. Ashley's face was frozen. The blood was draining from it. We would like to introduce you to Imani Monroe Vance, known professionally and to the board of her actual company simply as I M Monroe. The name meant nothing to them. Not yet. I could see Ashley's confused look. Who is I M? Monroe. I M. Monroe. Maria continued, her voice building to a climax. Is the founder, the sole owner, and the acting CEO of Aura Cosmetics, a privately held global corporation, currently valued at $900 million. The silence in the room was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked all the air, all the sound, all the life out of the room. Jamal's mouth fell open. Literally. He made a small gasping sound like a fish pulled from water. Ashley just stopped. Her white face turned a sick, chalky, greyish white. Her eyes were wide with a horror that was just beginning to dawn. Aura Cosmetics, Maria finished, letting the words land like hammer blows. Which I might add is headquartered in the Aura building in Manhattan, the very skyscraper you Mrs. Ashley Vance referred to last week as just another piece of your father-in-law's small real estate portfolio. Ashley's lawyer, Stevens, was bright red. He was sputtering. Your Honor, this is slander. This is inadmissible. This child that hacked into my client's... The judge's voice boomed from the screen, cutting him off. Be silent, Mr. Stevens, or I will have you sanctioned for contempt. Mrs. Vance has not finished. Ashley was trembling now, her eyes wide with panic. She was looking at me, then at Jamal, then at the door like a trapped animal searching for an escape. I looked at my grandson. Elijah, I said, my voice cold as ice. Play the last recording, the one you took, after I left the house. Elijah nodded. He pressed a final key. The room was so quiet, the click of the mouse was like a gunshot. And then, Ashley's voice, triumphant, vicious, and completely undeniable. I told you it would be easy. The old woman folded like a cheap suit. The recording continued. I heard my son's weak protests, and then the words that sealed their fate. When that 28 million hits your account on Friday, and I mean the second it hits, we have to transfer 5 million. We have to pay off those Vegas creditors before they get serious. I'm not losing my hands because you're too busy crying about your mummy. The recording stopped. Elijah sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a tomb. Ashley was no longer red. She was a pale, sickly green. Jamal looked like he was going to throw up. Stevens, the smug lawyer, just slowly sat down. He put his head in his hands. He knew the game was over. I stood up. I walked to the end of the table, so I was standing directly over my son and my daughter-in-law. I was no longer the frail widow. I was I.M. Monroe, and this was my boardroom. I looked at Judge Wright. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and strong, ringing with an authority they had never heard. For the last 6 months, while my husband Marcus lay dying in a hospital bed, my son and my daughter-in-law systematically embezzled $5 million from his company Vance Properties. They were caught in a gambling debt, and they stole from their own father to pay it. They thought his death would be their salvation. They thought they would inherit $28 million and use it to cover their crime before anyone noticed the hole. When they discovered my husband left everything to me, they panicked. They knew their timeline was up. They knew the creditors were coming. And they knew I, or rather the confused old woman they thought I was, would never approve such a payment. So they activated Plan B. They threw me out of my own home the day I buried my husband. They hired a fraudulent doctor. They faked medical reports. They lied to my bank. They recorded my private moments. They did all of this entire disgusting fraudulent guardianship petition, for one reason and one reason only, to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain control of my money and cover up their own felony theft. I stopped. I looked at Jamal. He was shaking, tears of pure terror streaming down his face. Then I looked at Ashley. Her eyes were wide, filled with a hate so pure it was almost beautiful. She knew she was beaten. They did not do this out of love, I said to the judge. They did this out of pure, desperate criminal greed. I took a breath, and then I delivered the final, fatal blow. They thought they were walking into a competency hearing today. I said, my voice soft now. They thought they were going to walk out with $28 million. I looked right at Ashley. They had no idea that my real legal team, the team from Aura Cosmetics, has spent the last week presenting this entire file of evidence: the embezzlement, the audit, the wire fraud, the conspiracy, and the sworn testimony of Dr. Miller to the Atlanta Police Department. Ashley's face crumpled. And, I finished, I believe the detectives are waiting for them, right outside that door. No, Ashley screamed. It was not a word. It was a sound of a soul tearing apart. Beside her, Jamal's eyes rolled back into his head. He slumped forward, his face hitting the polished table with a heavy final thud. He had fainted. And right on cue, the double doors of the conference room burst open. It was not the lawyer's assistants. It was two uniformed police officers and two detectives in suits. "Ashley and Jamal Vance," the lead detective said, his voice holding no pity. "You're both under arrest." Chaos erupted. Ashley let out a high-pitched shriek that sounded inhuman, a sound of pure, cornered panic. "No, you can't. He's lying. That boy is lying." Jamal, my son, made no sound at all. His eyes, wide with terror, rolled back in his head. He crumpled forward, his body slumping out of the chair and hitting the expensive hardwood floor with a heavy, sickening thud. He had fainted cold. "Jamal, get up!" Ashley screamed at her unconscious husband. But it was too late. The heavy double doors of the conference room burst open. Two uniformed Atlanta police officers stepped inside, followed by two detectives in suits. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly from a corporate hearing to a crime scene. "Ashley Vance, Jamal Vance," the lead detective said, his voice holding no pity, no emotion. He looked at Ashley, then at Jamal's unconscious form on the floor, and then back at Ashley. "You are both under arrest." "This is insane." Ashley backed away, knocking over her chair. "You can't arrest me. I'm the victim here. That old woman. She's... "Ma'am," the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. "We have a signed warrant. We have hours of your own recordings. You have the right to remain silent." As they pulled her hands behind her back, her eyes finally found mine. The hatred in them was absolute. "You," she screamed, her voice breaking. "You old leech. You set me up." I just watched. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just watched the woman who had thrown me out of my home, the woman who had tried to steal my life's work, be led away in handcuffs. One of the officers knelt beside Jamal, checking his pulse. "He's just fainted, sir. We'll get the paramedics." "No need," the lead detective said, looking at my son's pathetic form on the floor. "He can wake up in the back of the car. Cuff him too." That was the end of it. The trial was a formality, a joke. Faced with the forensic audit from Aura Cosmetics, the wire fraud evidence, Elijah's unshakable testimony, the bank's cooperation, and their own recorded voices, plotting the entire thing, they had no defense. Dr. Miller, the fake doctor, was arrested that same afternoon. He sang like a canary, telling the police everything Ashley had promised him in exchange for his testimony. Jamal and Ashley were convicted on all counts: felony embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy, and felony elder fraud. I heard they both received sentences of 10 to 15 years. I didn't go to the sentencing. I was busy. The first thing I did was clean house. I liquidated Vance properties. I sold the Atlanta mansion, the cars, the furniture. I sold every last trace of the $28 million life they had killed for. I used the money to pay back the $5 million they had stolen and to settle the debts with the Vegas creditors. I gave the rest to an Atlanta-based charity for children. I didn't keep a single dime. I didn't need it. A few months later, the air in New York was crisp. Autumn was painting Central Park in shades of gold and red. I was in my real office, the 80th floor corner office of the Aura building. My office. The door chimed. "Come in, Elijah." My grandson walked in. He was no longer the angry, scared boy in the hallway. He was a freshman at Columbia University, studying computer science. And he wore a new suit. "Good morning, Grandma," he said. He handed me a tablet. "I finished the security integration for the entire Aura network. I've triple encrypted all communications and built a new firewall. No one is ever getting into your business again. I took the tablet and smiled. That's impressive, Elijah. I learned from the best, he said, smiling back. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city I owned. I have a board meeting this afternoon, I said. We're discussing a new global expansion, and we have an open seat. Elijah's eyes went wide. A board seat, Grandma. I turned to him. Or, I said, we could just start you with a paid summer internship. Your choice. But this aura. This is your legacy, Elijah. The one you protected. The one you earned. He stood a little taller. I think I'll start with the internship, Grandma, but I'll take that board seat in a few years. I know you will, I said. He left for class, and I stayed at the window alone. My husband built an empire worth $28 million. I built one worth $900 million. My son and his wife tried to steal both. And in the end, they lost everything. They thought I was a confused, dependent old woman. They forgot that I was the one who taught Marcus how to run a business. They forgot who I really was. I showed them the consequences of underestimating a woman who built her own empire. I have to ask you, did I do the right thing? The story of Imani Vance teaches us a powerful lesson: never underestimate the quiet ones. Greed and arrogance blinded Jamal and Ashley. They looked at a 70-year-old woman, a grieving widow, and saw only what they wanted to see: someone weak, dependent, and easy to manipulate. They called her a leech, believing she was a confused old woman who knew nothing about the real world. But they made a fatal mistake. They failed to look beneath the surface. They couldn't imagine that this frail woman was secretly I.M. Monroe, the ruthless and brilliant CEO of a $900 million empire. Imani's story shows that true power isn't always loud. It is often strategic, patient, and built on decades of experience. While they were plotting to steal her $28 million, she was operating in a world they couldn't even comprehend. This story is a potent warning: never ever judge a person by the quiet, humble role they choose to play in front of you. The person you think is the weakest in the room might just be the one who owns the entire building. Respect your elders, not just for their past, but for the silent power they hold in the present. Have you ever watched someone underestimate the wrong person? Tell us what happened in the comments below.